Okay, so my chapter is called Midwifing the New, Institutional Leadership for Doctoral Education. And I haven't written about leadership um, in doctoral education before, and I hadn't really thought a great deal about it either, I suppose, but I have done quite a bit of it in different kinds of ways, as I describe in the chapter. So what I did when I wrote the chapter, was I read and thought about it, was I used the experience of writing the chapter to think about the university, what it's doing, where it's going, where doctoral education fits in it, because doctoral education, after all, is a very sexy part of what universities do. Universities want to grow it for all sorts of reasons. Some of those are to do with things like rankings and so on. But it is the place where we regenerate the scholarly community. So it's got this kind of very powerful kind of uh, kind of capacity to forge the academics of the future. So it seems to me it is a very worthwhile thing to think about how we function, how leadership functions with respect to doctoral education. When I wrote the chapter, I struggled with, as Kay has just said, I'm a critical a university studies scholar. I struggled with the shift in the meaning of the term hidden curriculum from its kind of earlier meanings to meaning unofficial, which is not to say that I don't think that hidden curriculum can have amazingly powerful and good outcomes, good can create real changes in people. But I kind of also want to hold on to the original intention of the word hidden curriculum, which was a concept, one of the many concepts that has been generated over the last many decades, I guess, to try and explain why outcomes of education are so uneven and why education, schooling and higher education, reproduces inequality, structured inequality in society. And so hidden curriculum became one of the kind of, I suppose, lines of argument for exploring that reproduction of inequality. And also, it became a kind of a way of thinking about why we say we're doing this in education, and actually what students constantly experience is something that's quite different to what it is that we say we're doing. So I've tried to go with the book's meaning of hidden curriculum, but also keep this other meaning in play, because I think it's a really powerful meaning for thinking about some of the problems that haunt higher education and education generally, actually. So when I began to think about the institutional leadership of doctoral education, actually my first experience was to be swamped with quite a lot of misery and despair. I'm a critical university studies scholar. And one of the things that I think kind of came to me with kind of clarity that I hadn't had for a long before was the extent to which I think the hidden curriculum of institutional leadership in doctoral education is obedience. You have to be if you are going to be a high profile institutional leader in doctoral education, before anything else, you have to be obedient. You have to literally be obedient to your institutional leaders. And then you have to be obedient to the new terms with which we think about higher education. And we think about higher education in a whole lot of ways that we didn't used to think about it. And you have to be obedient to them. And there is just about no space to dissent if you're an institutional leader. There's a lot more space if you're a jobbing academic on the ground, but there's not much. And that's kind of a brutal accusation, I think, to make. But it is actually part and parcel of a wider criticism of the culture of corporate universities and how that's changed the culture. And even as I speak, I have been today in a faculty meeting in my own faculty where I've watched this culture play out, and I've watched how silencing it is of people, and particularly of leaders. They are where once leaders disagreed with the levels of leadership above them, this is no longer the case. And this is true in doctoral education as well. So for many years now, I've listened to leaders in doctoral education in my university go on and on about needing to increase international students so that we can increase our rankings, and all the KPIs that they produce are kind of tied up in this bundle of kind of corporate university aspirations. I can't even figure out what the dreams of that university are anymore, what the dreams are. What is the dream of the corporate university? Survival, rankings, whatever it is. I can't figure them out. I've lost my grasp. The visible face of that obedience is bright thoughts of innovation and growth. And so everything that leaders in those positions say kind of come out of opportunities, bright thoughts of growth, possibility, and so on. That's where I began, and it was quite sort of sobering to realize that I had these things that I really needed to say, and I do say them at the beginning of the chapter. But there is also, and this is one of the wonderful things about the university is a house, a mansion of many rooms. And there are other rooms and other spaces of leadership in the university, more quotidian and daily kind of leadership. And I've thought a lot about this over the years because I've been involved in a women in leadership program in my university for a long time. And one of the things we talk a lot about there is what kind of leadership is possible, which is not positional leadership, not leadership for hire leadership, which is the leadership that occurs a lot now in the top ranks of the university. And there are still these wonderful rooms and spaces of leadership and which are available to us. And I write more about them, I think, in the chapter than my more gloomy vision of what's possible at the top. What kind of leadership do I mean? I think I mean leadership at the ground of the academic unit, the kind of leadership that might be described as being in a particular school or a department as the person who is the director of doctoral studies, or in my school it would be called the doctoral advisor. And this person is close to the community of supervisors and students. There's lots of different functions that this person can have. But they will know the students mostly. They'll know many of the students by name. They'll certainly know the supervisors in their school by name. And what they're doing is they're in the middle of the sort of flux and flow of what's going on in doctoral education. And here I think there are lots of possibilities for doing interesting things. One of the things about this kind of leadership that the university doesn't really love is it's kind of muddy leadership. It's the sort of leadership that goes on every day. It never fixes things for good. It intervenes in things. It sometimes generates some excitement and some new ideas, but really it is constantly on the move because it's constantly in this middle space between responding to the people who are there, the students and the supervisors, and it's also responding to these imperatives that come from the outside of the academic unit. Often those imperatives, of course, take real energy out of those roles. And so in the research I've done with academic women doctoral supervisors, those that have held this role talk about what they would love to do in the role and what they can do in the role because of the problems of what comes down to them by way of administering policies, signing off forms, completing standardized processes, and so on. So this is not a free space of creativity, but it is a space which is sort of below the radar. And so it's in this space that I've talked about the idea of the metaphor of midwifing as a way of thinking about what it means to be a leader in doctoral education. And I think that this role, this kind of leadership, like every other kind of leadership, also carries a hidden curriculum in terms of how we do it and what it is that we offer the doctoral students in our unit in school as a model or as a thought experiment about what it is to be an academic. So for me, the really important way to undertake these kinds of leadership roles in doctoral education is to consciously hold them as not only the things that we do, but the things that we are modeling for our doctoral students about what it is to have a meaningful academic life, what it is to be a good colleague, what it is to be capable in our own academic work. And I mean, I guess that the reality of this is, of course, is that these messages can be highly variable. We pass them on what we do, and we pass them on what we don't do, including what we bother with in terms of this kind of leadership. And then and the other thing that's, I think, interesting about these is that I think the people that do these roles matter. And I think one of the things about the corporate university is that leadership is position. And there's a sense in which anyone should be able to do it. And if you walk away tomorrow, then there's someone else that will do it, and it doesn't really matter. We've got a policy in place and a role description in place, and it should be person-proofed. Whereas my version of leadership is one where the person who does it really matters, because they are a living example of what it is to be an academic and a scholar and so on. And so I'm trying to hold this idea of the hidden curriculum in mind, to think about the fact that there is a whole space of possibility, as there is in our classrooms, to be the academics that we want to be, to model for our students what it is to be an academic, and to kind of fly below the radar, I guess, of the versions of leadership that I think are so problematic in our universities nowadays. In amongst all of that, I talk about interdependence, and I say that I think interdependence is a more important value than independence. And I write a bit about that. And I know many other people in the book, and Owen just talked a wee bit about that. Many other people in the book raise this from all sorts of different kind of angles. For me, there is a real question here, and maybe it comes out of my context in Aotearoa New Zealand, where we're thinking about how to indigenize the universities, which is, if we take seriously interdependence as the center of meaningful academic life and work, I think that this is an ontological challenge. And my question really is, are we ready? Are we open to consider an ontological challenge which takes us away from the privileging of the autonomous individual that the Western University has been so powerful in privileging? Are we ready? Can we do it? How would we do it? I think that's my question.